preferably buy some more land because we see kind of these economies of scale. So what I can do, yields are increasing, but if I buy land as a woman, I can then pass that down to my daughter, because otherwise only the boys get the land. Yeah.
Once he puts the price of the land, he has no more money to spend on that new land.
Yeah, exactly. And so it'll be, they basically increase their holdings by renting land from farmers that are too old, that have moved to the city, that are sick. And so that's how they then, so Leonida, I think she was planting another half an acre this year. Rizzoa, one of the farmers, adding. So for them, it's a big increase to go from 1 acre to 2 acres, to go from 3/4 of an acre to 1.5 or 2 acres. And so you'll kind of see that, but I don't think you'll see massive consolidation because there's too many farmers with too many small lands. And so that's kind of, at least the purpose of this, if they can, the problem in front of us, the hunger season, this oxymoron of hungry farmers, how do we overcome that, at least if they can raise their yields and productivity and also the nutritious content of that, then they can at least conquer the hunger season, and then hopefully their kids go to school and then progress that way. Yeah, but we see it in one season that can happen to one family. So look at it as a single family instead of all of Africa or all of Kenya. And then you kind of accumulate that. So again, we kind of divide the problem down into smaller things, and if we can get these 3 letters into their lives as A and D, we can do that. Yep.
Firstly, thank you very much for your great talk. I'm a big fan of One Acre Fund, and I'm very young and an MBA student myself. I appreciate his work.
Good.
But, my question is that we see that you have social entrepreneurs like Andrew, and then you have Melinda and Gates Foundation, you have international organizations supporting such initiatives. But because it's such a huge problem in the world and farmer suicide is a big issue in a place like India, can there be a partnership model that could be formed where you have social entrepreneurs, private organizations, international organizations, as well as the governments working together to solve it?
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. So Andrew Yoon, who he mentions, who's the founder of the 1 Acre Fund, that he's now in his 6th year. I think they started in 2005, 2006. They started with just 40 farmers that they were working with. Now they're over 150,000. Farmers that they're working with. So kind of a rapid scaling up. But he's looking at, can there be kind of a network of social entrepreneurs, foundations, philanthropists, government operations, other NGOs, all these actors that are then kind of involved in this agriculture sphere, tapping the potential of these smallholder farmers, but not all doing the same thing. So where are there more microfinance agencies coming in and rural lending, because then these farmers, instead of having to sell some of their harvest right after the harvest when the prices are low, because that's when the schools are starting, to sell that harvest for the tuition fees for their kids, particularly when they're in high school. No, where's the microfinance guys that can come in and say, we'll give you a loan for 4 or 5 months, collateralized by 4 bags of maize, here's the money, pay the school fees, the boys in school or the girls in school, hooray, sell, repay us back in 4 months, sell the maize, and you'll probably be selling it for double or triple or quadruple the price than you would have 4 months earlier when the market was flooded by maize, because it's right after the harvest period. So to get them in, to get people with irrigation ideas, people with better storage ideas, infrastructure. So we were kind of talking about this at lunch, that all these efforts that are out there, and in Nashville, I was kind of surprised. I mean, all just the activity that's going on around here by various NGOs or people that have ideas of things and are in this realm, that if they kind of realize that what they're doing are bits and pieces of this mosaic that all adds together. And then President Obama's Feed the Future program kind of takes a bigger view of this and goes to the countries and say, hey, what do you guys do in Kenya? What are you doing on the agriculture front for your smallholder farmers? Where are your budget shortfalls? Where can the private sector fit into there? Where can other people who are raising money fit into there? And so that we kind of drive this whole thing of everybody moving in the right direction. So that's a really good question. There was another, whoops.
Can we do this to the last question? Then if you have other questions, I remind you that there's a reception just next door. So let's come on over and you can really get Roger.
And there's
in the corner and not let him out until he answers the question.
And there's food and drink, more importantly, for any journalist. It's got to be food and drink. And there's books. I'll sign them all.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, sorry, thank you.
It's just a quick one. So who handles the microfinance?
Well, there's a number. So from the 1 acre fund, they have what's called like a market bundle. And in that is, it's the microfinancing is kind of a key point of that. But they're not a microfinance organization. I mean, that's not what their main thing is. It's the provision, it's making these essential elements of farming accessible to farmers. So it's buying on bulk, lower prices, more efficiency, the seeds, the fertilizer, microdosing of the fertilizer that the farmers need, the extension advice, the provision of that, and some other things that are part of that. And part of that then is this loan. For a half an acre, it's $40 or so. 1 acre is doing that, right? But if other Opportunity International, Women's Microfinance Initiative, if they all start moving out more and more into the rural areas, Opportunity International is, I know, and I think the Women's Microfinance Initiative is too, then you just have more people providing these things for other things. So Abby talked about power and the power problem, electricity, and how that could also really help not only the health clinics, you know, hooray, we built a health clinic, but there's no power. So if the women aren't delivering during the day, they're staying at home because they may at least have a candle or something, as opposed to going to a dark clinic to have their baby and schlepping over there through the night and things. So this is all connected. But as these farmers, as their disposable income increases because they just have more food that they're producing, then they can start connecting their houses to electricity. So Zipporah, not far from her house, there's like a technical school. She's not that far from the village. There's electricity poles there, but to run it into her house is quite expensive. And so, although it might be there, it's not accessible to the farmers. And so, kind of microfinance, all these kind of people that have all these great ideas to do things, this provision of cheap electricity, solar, whatever, all these ideas that are needed in kind of this greater network that needs to come up around this. So, you were going to say something, or? Okay, good, thank you. Can't they look straight at the cameras? They probably look odd, right? But you look on the side, it looks a little bit better. That's right. So strange proclivities that people will have. That. She looks familiar, the one you were talking to.
Yeah, that's Jen Mardell. She's in charge of Bloodwater Mission, or she started Bloodwater Mission with Joseph Clay.
Okay.
Yeah, so when she's taking sabbatical right now to write her book, so that's why she was not there earlier,
Okay.
but she's trying not to do work. So
What's your book about?
starting Bloodwater Mission. So James is her husband, who's the person that's in charge of Bloodwater.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Okay, that's her husband. Okay.
Yeah,
Where are you sitting?
I'm just somewhere over there.
I'll put this here. Won't need it unless there's a blast of air conditioning.
You want to do it after? Or you want to do it after? We're going to
Yeah,
have a
do it after.
reception.
Yep. Hey, Carthage.
Yes,
Right?
exactly. Yep.
That's what I was thinking.
Last,
So
whenever that
I wanted to say that this morning, but there were or this afternoon there were too many people
Yeah, no,
at
that's
lunchtime when you were sitting, and I was going to say, "Hey, Jen, I'm not ignoring you. Remember you from Carthage
No, you have to talk
and
to
our
important people.
snowy and ice-filled
That's right, yeah.
day, right?"
And you scraped off my car.
Yes. And are you still doing that area, or now you're down here?
There's only 3 of us kind of break up the states. They're kind of scattered.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of the same states as Abby, and then I do Wisconsin, Illinois.
But you're based in Washington. Yeah. I moved there this summer. So from Chicago. Yeah. In July, end of June. But then I've been traveling quite a bit since then to start trying to settle down. So it's just my wife and myself because the kids are both in college. Daughter's at Georgetown, so
Oh, right, that's right.
she's close enough.
Yes.
And so, oops.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me lay this over here.
Yeah.
On your iPad. Well, yes, I do. Will you autograph it?
Yeah, see,
Scratch it into the-
that's the problem with those things,
that's
right?
right,
They haven't
yeah.
developed a thing to.
Well, you should
They
have
need
it,
some
yeah.
kind of stylus, right?
Yeah.
Or just something maybe that you can do a screen, and then people,
I can
as they
take
go
it.
as they go around, they can just compile a page of signatures from authors or something, or inscriptions.
Already, like, with your signature in it.
Yeah.
Extra.
Yeah, that's
I
true,
don't want
right?
an extra, though.
And so, yeah,
It would go to what?
yeah. Who wants to
Goes
tell
to
you?
$1.
Yeah.
Actually, we don't collect money, but that's all right. We'll send it somewhere.
You send it to us.
Yeah,
Yeah, they just need our voice, not our money, right? That's
great.
that's. Okay, fine. Mhm.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out this evening. My name is Graham Reside. I'm the director of the Cal Turner Program for Moral Issues. We're one of the sponsors of this event, One. I will introduce Abby in a second. She's with One. She'll tell you a little bit about her organization. But I teach here at the Divinity School, and also I'm the director of global education. I had the good fortune of having lunch, along with a lot of other people, with Roger today. And as he spoke to us informally over lunch, he talked about the fact that he is a journalist, or has served as a journalist for most of his life, and that he also has this sense of being an advocate, or doing advocacy. And it reminded me of the work that we do at the Cal Turner Program with professionals, to develop in them a sense of being an advocate for others. And that's really our mission, is to help Vanderbilt professional students think of their work as medical students, nurses, divinity students, business students, lawyers, to remind them that they are finally advocates for others. Roger's life has been one of being an advocate, and we're very grateful that he was willing to come and speak here at Vanderbilt. Roger, thank you for your presence here with us. I won't say a lot about his CV. You can look on the sheet of paper that we have. Maybe Addie will say a little bit, and Roger can tell his own story. But as I've already indicated, he worked as a journalist for 30 years with the Wall Street Journal, covering international affairs, global affairs, and has recently written a book, The Last Hunger Season, about hunger in Africa particularly. I hope that we will have a chance to hear from him and then have a sort of open discussion. And afterwards, we have a reception right across the hall. I hope you can join us for that. Roger will be around to sign books, and you can purchase books over there as well. When we put on these events, Michelle Bukowski is our, I work with her, and everything that goes well is because of her. Everything that doesn't go well is because of me. So Michelle, thank you very much. Abby, could you come up and tell us a little bit about one? This is Abby Sasser. She is the Southeast Director.
Hi there. So I am with the One Campaign. We are a nonpartisan advocacy organization aimed at eliminating extreme poverty around the world. And I know that sounds crazy, but we actually think that it can happen. People living on less than $1.25 a day are people we deem as living in extreme poverty. And in the last 20 years, that number has been cut in half. So we really believe with smart, effective programs, we can continue to see that number decrease so that by the year 2030, we're at a virtual zero. We do that through asking people to use their voice on behalf of the world's poorest people. We do zero fundraising. What we do ask you to do is use your voice, speak to your members of Congress, speak to your senators, tell them people in the United States care about these people, and we want to make sure that those smart, effective programs remain in place. Instead of blabbing on and on, though, I'm just going to show you a video that I think demonstrates that a little bit better.
We know what it costs, we know what to do. Do it. Do it.
Maybe I'm not going to show you a video because it's very slow. The sound's there. Just listen to it. Alright. Well, let me try one more try. See if this works. Alright.
The new kind of entrepreneurial activism, nonpartisan, hard-headed, focused on results.
My senators don't care what I think, but that completely changes when you get involved with one. You realize that very important people are listening to you and that your voice does matter.
Well, I give a lot of credit for one. When I was running for the United States Senate, they showed up at every event I was at. So it's very effective. Congratulations.
Famine is the real insanity.
One campaign. Thank you for bringing us. Because of your work all across Africa, children who are no longer starving, mothers who are no longer dying of critical disease, fathers who are again providing for their families. Because of all of you, so many people are now left.
I'm not engaged, I'm not an average citizen, but I can still make a difference because of the tools that one can
That is us. Like I said, we really want people to get involved by using their voices and advocating. So I hope you'll go to one.org. My congressional district leader here in Nashville, George, and I will both be over in the reception area after. So we'd love to speak to you a little bit more. But I know you are here to see Roger Thurow, so I will introduce you to him now. Roger, as has been a reporter for 30 years for the Wall Street Journal. He saw everything from Nelson Mandela's release to the fall of the Berlin Wall, to the famine in Ethiopia in the early 2000s. He's been an incredible advocate for one and been able to really speak out on the issues that he has faced firsthand. He has written 2 books, the first of which was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, Enough, Why the World's Poorest People Starve in a World of Plenty. And now he's going to speak to us about the last hunger season, his most recent book, where he actually spent a year with smallholder farmers in Kenya, and can tell us a little bit more about that. So, Roger?
Thank you. Thank you, Abby. Thanks, Graham, for having me. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks, everybody, for coming. It's a great day outside as the mist lifts, or the haze, or whatever it is. I moved from Chicago to Washington this summer in June. People were like, "What's wrong with you? You're moving to Washington in June," but it's actually been an okay summer so far. So glad to see it's still continuing. Yeah, we were in Atlanta yesterday, so this is my long-promised southeastern swing that we had been trying to arrange. So thanks for the hospitality and hosting me here. And I thought, since this is a Divinity school, that I would start off with a moment of what I truly believe was a moment of divine inspiration as I was reporting and beginning to report this book, secular plug, of the last hunger season. And in this book, I follow 4 smallholder farmers in western Kenya, as Abby said, through the course of a year. And it was a matter of okay, what farmers am I going to follow? It was kind of the reverse of a needle in a haystack. I mean, there's so many farmers, and which ones kind of would I pick out? So it wasn't a matter of finding farmers, but which ones would I, which ones in particular would I settle on? And these farmers were all the ones that I was going to follow are members of an organization or affiliates of an organization called the 1 Acre Fund, and I can talk more about that. It's a social enterprise organization that's really bringing some interesting innovations to smallholder farmers in Kenya, and kind of reversing this neglect that we've seen over the last number of decades, particularly of smallholder farmers in African agriculture. And the thing is, the farmers in the 1 Acre Fund, they all farm their own individual plots. Smallholder farmers, maybe half an acre, 3/4 acre, acre and a half of land is what they're working with. And they farm, so they're individual plots, but they're kind of all, they form small groups to help them in particularly busy times of the farming, during the planting, sometimes during the weeding, during the harvest. Part of the thing with the 1 Acre Fund is that there's microcredit for them, so it's kind of this microcredit idea of small groups that so they can have kind of come together and peer pressure for the repayments. But anyway, so these farmers and these groups, maybe 8, 10, 12 that get together, and they all have delightful names of their groups. Most of them uplifting, so joy and happiness and God's grace, God's goodness, faith. And I was at a gathering of these farmers, and they were at church, Kenya Assemblies of God church. They oftentimes meet in churches because it's the only place in the villages that would have enough room to sit and that are shaded or would have a roof over for enough of them. And it was a training session, and afterwards the farmers were there, so I was talking to them, and one of the farmers, Leonida, who seemed to be particularly interested that I was there, was curious what I was doing, interested in telling her story. I said, "Hey, Leonida, okay, so what's the name of your group of farmers?" She said, "We are called Amua." So a Swahili word that I didn't know, Amua. So I said, "Well, what's Amua mean?" Amua means to decide. "Well, what have you decided?" "We have decided," Leonida says, "to move from our misery to Canaan." I said, "The biblical Canaan." She says, "That's right." I said, "The land of milk and honey." She said, "Absolutely, the land of promise." "Yes, that's it." And I figured, Leonida, I have to follow her and her group because the very name of her group was connoting this modern-day exodus of these farmers from this misery of a hunger season, this time of profound deprivation this notion of hungry farmers, they're not grown enough to feed their families, to this Canaan, this land of milk and honey. They're not moving anywhere. It's not an exodus of going from one place to another, but of this transformation of their land and the potential and capability that these smallholder farmers have. And so I figured, wow, of all the farmers that were available, somehow I'm led to Leonida, and she tells me this story. I said, her I've got to follow to see what this exodus can be in this first year, or this year that I was following her. So Leonida then becomes one of the prime, perhaps the lead character of the four farmers in the book. And I then discovered, kind of in the year of reporting this, kind of their deep spiritual connection to each other religiously, and then also to their land. So I figured there must have been some kind of divine inspiration of what led me to these four farmers. I also want to begin with, since this is, I think I mentioned moral leadership, professionals, moral leadership. So in the film we saw Nelson Mandela. And we all know he's been sick, and quite sick the last several months. And I was in South Africa, based there for the Wall Street Journal when he was released, was in Cape Town that day. And so I've been going back through a lot of the things that he's said, and kind of the impact that he's had, and some of his lasting words and legacy that should be with us. And he said something that are kind of, really profoundly wise words. He said, "It always seems impossible until it happens." You kind of think of that, well, kind of what's so wise about that? It's kind of self-evident. It's impossible until it happens. But then he considered the source of those words, Nelson Mandela, and he knows whereof he speaks. Because if there was one thing in the 1970s and 1980s, and he was released in 1990, and those of a certain age here, we would all know this, one thing that seemed certain was that Nelson Mandela would never be released from prison. Apartheid wouldn't end in our time, in our lives. Seems impossible. Similarly, on the other side of the world, the Berlin Wall. That's never going to fall in our lives. Communism, that'll never be toppled. But what happened? November 1989, the Berlin Wall falls. It always seems impossible until it happens. February 11th, 1990, glorious day in South Africa. Mandela walks for freedom. It always seems impossible until it happens. So he's an expert on this subject. And I mention that because that's kind of really the essence of as Abby said, what the One campaign is trying to do, the end of extreme poverty. And to me, and all the reporting that I've done at the Wall Street Journal, in particular the last decade or so, the kind of essence or the embodiment, the manifestation of that extreme poverty is hunger. And if you look at the situation that we're in, that here we are in the 21st century, and at the turn of the 21st century, hunger was getting worse. There were 1 billion people that were chronically malnourished. Say 10% of those are from crisis situations, from famines, from hunger calamities, natural disasters, whatever's causing them. The other vast number, the 90%, are chronically hungry, kind of a grinding everyday hunger, day after day. And a lot of it kind of a hidden hunger that they call from micronutrient deficiency. You look at somebody and figure, they look okay, they're not those pictures of famine that one sees, but they're still malnourished because of the micronutrient deficiency. So it leaves us with, basically, I think the estimates in the Lancet just did a kind of a wonderful series on malnutrition and how to attack it. Their estimates are that 1 out of every 4 children in the developing world are stunted. That means they're not going to be able to achieve their physical and mental capacity or potential. And the cost of that for the individual child, that child grows to adulthood, probably has less education because of that. The earning capacity is lower, so the impact on the family on the community. Some of these countries, India, 50% of their children are malnourished. Places in Africa, 40, 50%. Guatemala, not that far from here, highest rates in the America, 48% or so malnourished. The impact that it has on these countries of maybe taking 8, 10, 12, 15% off their GDPs because of this lack of fulfilling the potential of an individual and their earning capacity, and what that means on a global situation. So we can kind of look at that and say, oh yeah, that's too bad, it's happening over there. But the impact for all of us, because it's estimated by the World Bank, by the Food and Agricultural Organization, other UN bodies, that combined impact of malnutrition, of stunting, may cost the global economy $2.5 to $3 trillion a year. So think of that impact on global trade. And you think about these issues, nearly 1 billion people chronically malnourished, 1 in 4 children stunted. My goodness, what a problem. It seems impossible. How are we going to eradicate that? It seems impossible until it happens. And so I want to talk about a little bit today is how it is happening and how we are seeing this. David Beckman from Bread for the World, he figures this is like embodied by Leonida. This is a modern day exodus. It's kind of an exodus in our time, and the numbers that were shown, and as Abby was talking about, and that one can also say more about in terms of the progress. And Bono talks a lot about this himself and the numbers, and he's really a kind of a data-driven guy. He calls himself a factivist, that he deals with facts, numbers, along with his activism. And as Graham said, I mean, kind of how I come to this, and to be both a journalist, activist / advocate, it kind of made me uncomfortable at the beginning when one starts adding them together, because it's kind of, they don't go together, journalist, activist. What about the journalistic neutrality or objectivity in looking at something? But then I figured, no, all journalists are activists. What we write, we want to see an impact to it. Not just writing things for the sake of it. We're doing things. The stories that we seek to write, we want to see something happen to that. Move issues, move people, better the world. And so, for me, that starts in Ethiopia in 2003. And so at that time, I was a foreign correspondent with the Wall Street Journal. I was a foreign correspondent for a total of 20 years with the paper in Europe, Africa, mainly. And I did what foreign correspondents do. I traveled from place to place and story to story, kept always on the move, rarely going back to stories. What's new? New places to go to. Until one story and one place stopped me cold. It was Ethiopia, 2003, and the first famine of the 21st century. 14 million people were on the doorstep of starvation at that time. They were being kept alive, if they were to survive at all, by international food aid. I was based in Zurich, in Switzerland, at the time, running about humanitarian and development issues. Had been starting to look at agriculture, the hunger problem that we had brought with us into the 21st century. What are we doing? Kind of the shame, the disgracefulness of that. And then this famine happens. And so I go down to Ethiopia. And my first day in Addis Ababa, I was receiving a briefing from somebody at the World Food Program who was telling me about the extent of the famine, not only in Ethiopia, but throughout the Horn of Africa, East Africa, all kind of down the coast and into southern Africa. Because at the same time, you had this horrible, deadly mixture of that HIV/AIDS was exploding across the continent, particularly in southern Africa. And what was happening there, and what people were then starting to identify, was something that they began to call a new variant famine. A lot of times in famine or in chronic hunger situations, it's caused by crops dying. The new variant, by the crops that the farmers are planting, by the crops dying. There's no food. In this new variant famine, driven by HIV/AIDS, it was the farmers who plant the crops that were dying. And so, because at that time, I think the World Food Program was estimating that by the turn of the century, start of the new millennium, there had been 9 million smallholder farmers in southern Africa that had been killed and died from HIV/AIDS, or were sick. And in a lot of cases, they hadn't taught their kids how to farm. There were all these child-headed households. I think Swaziland at that time, 10% of the population, 10% of the households were headed by children. So they didn't know how to plant. They didn't have the proper techniques. So kind of this famine, this hunger that's driven not by crops dying, but by the farmers dying. So Africa at that time could have been the hungriest it had been in memory in 2003. So this guy from the World Food Program, he's telling me all this, and the next day we're planning to go down and visit some of the hunger zones in Ethiopia. And he gives me this piece of advice, which to me sounded kind of fairly ominously as a warning. And he said, Roger, looking into the eyes of someone dying of hunger becomes a disease of the soul. What you see is that nobody should have to die of hunger. I'm figuring disease of the soul. Wow, what's this guy talking about? I mean, when you visit Africa or maybe elsewhere in the developing world, you're inundated with this medical advice. Take your malaria pills, watch out for cholera epidemics, mind the meningitis season, don't stand in any puddles or standing water for the parasites. So all this medical advice, and this guy's telling me, beware of this disease of the soul that you'll encounter. So I'm saying, wow, what am I getting myself into? Next day, we're down in the hunger zones. We're driving up a corkscrew road up to the Baricha Plateau. Going to get off the main road. On a dirt road, we're continuing going down. We come to a village. And in that village, there was newly erected was this warren of olive green tents that had been set up. And they were emergency feeding tents, and they were filled with dozens upon dozens of starving children and their anguished parents who would carry these children to this place. And I kind of with some trepidation, remember this warning or this advice, I parted the flaps of one of the tents and I stepped inside. And it was there for the first time in my career as a journalist. I'm ashamed to say, after all my time in Africa, that there for the first time I was truly looking into the eyes of the hungry, the children, and then their parents. How are we moving this? There we go. The eyes of Hargirso, the little boy, and his father, Tesfaye. 5-year-old Hargirso, he weighed just 27 pounds when his father had carried him to this emergency feeding tent several days earlier. So they'd already been there for a couple of days when I was there. He was starting to get the treatment for his severe malnourishment. But as severely malnourished, his face was swollen, his stomach was distended. His arms and legs were thin, his legs so thin and so weak he couldn't stand. You know, at times his father has having to hold him up between his own legs so he doesn't topple over. And his eyes. I mean, his eyes were like deep, dark holes. There was no kind of playfulness or impishness that you would expect from a child or baleful beseeching of somebody in such dire situation. They were dark, they were empty and lifeless. And his father kind of had this look, and from his eyes, this feeling of such guilt. When I talked to him and interviewed him, he said, "What have I done to my child? What have I done to cause this?" It was there in the eyes of father and son that my career as a journalist changed. It was catalyzed. It was given new emphasis. What I realized is that I need to stop going from story to story. This is the one story that I need to stop and concentrate on. Hunger in the 21st century. The elimination of hunger. This impossibility that we're seeing. So great is it. So my career changed at that time. I became almost a one-issue journalist. This is the story that I want to write about. And what I saw indeed infected my soul. It was as if I was being propelled. This is what I have to do. All other stories began paling in comparison. I needed to keep writing about this story. How do we brought hunger into the 21st century? My journalistic mantra became outrage and inspire. And in writing the first book, Enough, Why the World's Poor Starved in an Age of Plenty, I mean, if you looked in on myself and Scott Killman, who's at the Wall Street Journal, we wrote the book together. He was a journal's agricultural expert in the United States. Kind of in our moments of writer's block, it'd be kind of outrage and inspire was our mantra, because that's what we wanted to accomplish. outraged that we had brought hunger with us into the 21st century when the Green Revolution had been one of the great scientific and technological achievements of the 20th century, and really knocking back and conquering famine in the original the original basket cases in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and then spreading up to China and over to Latin America and the great advances they had made there. But that Green Revolution, for various reasons, never made it to Africa, mainly because of the neglect of the international community. The Green Revolution was successful. We don't need to keep prosecuting or pursuing this. And then also the neglect of the African governments themselves. And so that then became his outrage and inspire, kind of my motivating mission or factor as a journalist. And so then kind of write that first book, and even though I'm still with the Wall Street Journal, I'm kind of being described as, well, journalist/activist advocate. And as I said, it was kind of uncomfortable at the beginning that, well, should I be in that role as a journalist? I figured, no, that's what journalists do. And so kind of for all the professionals and people that are in this space and they're doing something with an NGO, with their corporations, with a philanthropy or a foundation or something, also embrace this advocacy, this activist role. As a journalist, what can I do? I can raise the clamor. So that's what I set forth to do. And again, one of the staggering issues is kind of the seeming, the immenseness of this issue, and how do we kind of bring that into terms that we can actually grasp and get a hold of. And so one of the great challenges we face, as I said, is the stunting in the world. This next book that I'm working on is on the 1,000 days, which is on the 1,000 days between the time when a woman becomes pregnant and the second birthday of the child. If you add them up, it's like 1,000 days. And the importance of nutrition in that period, any burst or shock of malnutrition in that period is where the stunting begins and starts being triggered. Already, if the mother is malnourished, low birth weight in the child, anything with, again, the lack of nutrition, malnutrition of the mother, maybe not the proper nutrients in the breast milk, complementary feeding, not the food around that they can to help with the infant child. So that's where the stunting begins. And to me, this little boy, Hargirso, I'd always wondered, well, what became of Hargirso? So 5 years afterwards, in 2008, I went back. Hargirso had survived, so hooray for that, but he was horribly stunted. So short, wasn't in school, he was 10 years old at the time. I went back again earlier this year. And here's what I found. There's Hargirso. He's 15 now. He's like half the size of his father, 2/3 the size. And his dad's not, tremendously tall. And so, but that's the size that he is. So the physical stunting, 15 years old. Hooray, Hargirso's in school. It was great to see that, because at 5 years old, we had talked about that. It was like, well, Hargirso, I was telling the father, if he gets a chance, it'd be great if he can go to school. So I go back 5 years later, and he's in school. And his father's like, yeah, we were talking about he should be in school, and it's only now that I figure he's kind of capable of going. Hooray, Hargirso's in school. He's in first grade. 15-year-old, first grade. The day that I was there, they were learning some of their alphabet. In his little notebook, he's writing the alphabet. And they were doing consonant and vowel combinations. So they were on their B's. So it was B, ba, bo, boo, kind of the sounds. And he was writing that down. He's obviously very proud of himself, but he's surrounded in class. He's kind of the same size with all the other kids who are 6, 7, 8 years old. And again, we're looking at the impact of stunting, so here's the individual impact. He should be helping his father on the farm at that stage. His father says, yeah, he does some things, but he's not strong enough. 15 years old, he should be in high school, secondary school, planning, what else can I do? Do something in business, run a shop, be a teacher. He's in first grade. The impact on the community. He's not even the youngest in the class. He's not even the oldest. There was a 16 and a 17-year-old child in there, also impacted greatly from that time in 2003. He was 5 when I first met him, so he was outside of the 1,000 days period, but I had talked to the mother and father, and they said, no, even from the time of birth, we had struggles as smallholder farmers. And so that the malnutrition and that, so when the famine did hit, he was already in not the best condition, particularly with his immune system and things. So his stunning had indeed started in this 1,000 days, and we can see the importance of that. And it's these smallholder farmers that then were bearing the brunt of this neglect of agriculture development, which has led to the persistence of hunger in Africa over all this time. And one campaign talks frequently about budgetary issues. So less than 1% of our federal budget, less than 1% goes to development aid or foreign aid. When you ask most people, it's like, it's 10% or 20%, if only. Well, they say we should cut it back. It's already only 1%. And the things that are accomplished with that 1% are quite mighty when you think about it. Yes, there's a lot of waste, but it also needs to be restructured and continued because there's a lot of things that happen from that. In the early 1980s, as the Green Revolution was still on its march through various parts of the world, 20 or 25% of all American foreign aid went to agriculture development spending. By 2004, 2005, 2006, agriculture development had basically fallen off the table. We were in this period, this long period of stable prices, abundant food, problem solved. We don't need to do this anymore. Structural adjustment, financial things, that area we started to neglect. By 2005 or so, there was only like 2 or 3% of American foreign aid or foreign assistance went to agriculture development. The people who bore the brunt of that, smallholder farmers, Hargirso's family, his father, Tesfaye. So what you ended up with was what I think is perhaps the cruelest irony in Africa. Africa's hungriest people are her smallholder farmers. Think of that, this oxymoron, hungry farmers. How ridiculous and stupid and shameful and disgraceful. Hungry farmers. How can farmers who get up every morning to tend their fields to try to grow enough crops to feed their family, how can they be hungry? But most of the times they fail because they don't have access to the essential elements of farming that we all take for granted here in the United States and in Europe and the rest of the developed and rich parts of the world. And so that's what I set out to then write about in this book, in the last hunger season. What is the life of these smallholder farmers? And when you think about this challenge that's facing us, we've got this challenge, so many hungry, the stunting problem, the consequences of that, the challenge that we're facing that by, say, the year 2050, we're expected to add another 2.5 billion people to our planet. That's like adding another China, or 2 more Chinas, or 2 more Indias. Along with that, the population increase, there's this greater demand from the population to eat more food. The population becomes more prosperous. Thank goodness and blessedly, people are moving out of situations of formerly hungry countries, China, parts of India, to the middle class. They're eating more, they're eating better, they're diversifying their diets. This pressure on the global food chain is growing. So we're figuring another nearly doubling of food production by 2050 to satisfy this demand and this pressure on the food chain. It's these smallholder farmers who are going to be so important for us. They make up the majority of the population in most African countries. 60 to 70% are smallholder farmers. Most of the jobs, the livelihoods in Africa is in the rural areas, is connected to farming and smallholder farming. The majority of food produced in Africa is by these smallholder farmers. So we have to reverse the neglect. And here's where we see, that's what I wanted to write about in the book, what happens when that neglect begins to be reversed? What's the potential of these farmers? So one of the families I follow in the book is the Beketi family. This is Zipporah Beketi and 3 of the 4 children. The little boy in front, David, he's 2, 3 years old throughout the course of the year of the book. He's malnourished, distended belly, kind of mottled hair. He had a constant cough, which it was almost like a bell on a cat or a bell on a cow. You could always tell where David was because of his cough. And we didn't know, sometimes, well, where's David? You know, we'd hear a cough and, oh, he's up playing by the rocks, or he's over, over by the cows or something. So there's David with his cough. His immune system weakened. They're living in this house that's made of mud and sticks, thatched roof, leaks in the rain. Rain becomes a double-edged sword. Hooray, the rains are here. We can now plant our crops, but, oh, they're washing away, they're coming into our bedroom, into our kitchen area. They wash away their outhouse in most years. It would be kind of to the left of the house, and it's not there anymore. That had washed away. Desperate. The year before I got there, you can kind of see their plot is this 1 acre kind of on the other side of their house. They had no access to credit, so poor they had no money. All they could afford was seed to plant 1/4 of an acre. Their harvest in 2010, so the year I followed them was 2011, the harvest in 2010 was 2 90-kilogram bags of maize. That's all. That lasted just a couple of months. So this hunger season, which is the period from the time that the food from the previous harvest runs out, it's been consumed, it's been sold, to raise fees for school, to pay for malaria medication, to do something fix something on the house, to do something. From the time that food from the previous harvest runs out and the time the next harvest comes in, that's this called the hunger season, this period of profound deprivation when food is rationed and meals decline from 3 a day to 2 to 1 to none on some days a couple days in a row. Just a weak bowl of porridge or a weak cup of tea might be all that they have all day long. For Zipporah and her family, this hunger season extended from 9.5 or 10 months of the year. This period of profound deprivation. She hears that there's this organization called the 1 Acre Fund that's coming in to her area, the social enterprise organization. They are providing access to, it's not a charity, they're not giving anything away, but with microcredit, they're providing financing for access to better quality seeds, some soil nutrients, because their soil is so weak and poor, microdosing of fertilizer, extension advice, how to plant, how to get the most out of your inputs, some marketing advice, things on storage, how best to store, how long to store, when to take advantage of the markets. All this starts coming into her life, and she says, I got to do something. We're so desperate, I want to join. So she joins this group, like Leonida. So there she is on a day when they have the input distribution. She's got her seed, she's got her fertilizer, she's so proud of it, she's like sitting on top of it, and these guys with motorcycles or bikes there, they're helping them, these farmers transport that to their houses. And Zipporah, she's so happy to have this and wanting to make sure that that's secure, that she basically sits on top of it and then takes it home. Goes through the training in the top picture. Plant in straight lines, that's their planting string. Kind of all the techniques of planting that we kind of take for granted again or know as kind of backyard gardeners. Here's how you plant a plot. For them, it's kind of all new. Every day, their maize is growing, and they're kind of rubbing their eyes and looking in astonishment of how this is growing. What they were able to do is, with this access to financing, plant an entire acre. 1/4 acre the year before. Now they could plant their entire nice acre that they had prepared for planting, but never had enough money to be able to plant the whole thing. Corn's tall. The harvest picture. Harvest day comes. Boy, they're eager. They're cutting it down. The cobs, the ears are really nice. Then they're shelling them. Little David, he's sitting on the ground. They're shelling by hand with these kind of mechanical things where you use your fingers. Wow. The harvest is put in bags. It's stored in their bedroom. 20 bags of maize is the result of that. Imagine, from 2 bags the previous year to 20, staggering increase in wealth. That's what they could do. Jeez, it seems impossible. How are they going to get out of this hunger season until it happens? This is the potential. This is kind of what can happen and be multiplied all across Africa and really scaled up. And the 1 Acre Fund is scaling up. They're working with like 150,000 farmers. Western Kenya, Rwanda, Burundi, starting in Tanzania. So they're spreading. There's a lot of other organizations that are getting into this agriculture sphere. Wow. 20 bags of maize, what can we do with that? Zipporah is thinking. She figures, okay, 8 bags will be enough to feed my family throughout the year. And at my last trip there at Christmas time, I got an idea, she says, and she brings out this blueprint that she's drawn, her and her husband, for their new house. They're in this crummy little house of mud and sticks, kind of melts away in the rain, thatched roof, leaks in the rain. They're going to build a house with solid, real bricks, metal roof on top, all these rooms, study room for the kids, bathroom, not with running water, but kind of a hose that comes in. And think of that, sanitation suddenly. They're washing up before meals. There's no kitchen on here. The kitchen is a separate building. In their previous house, it was part of the house where they lived. They're cooking over fire, smoke all over. That's one of the reasons David had this cough. Horribly unsanitary and bad for the condition of the children. So that's her dream. This is what I can do with this increase in wealth. I go back 13 months after we're talking about this blueprint, January of this year. Here's what I find. The house, the blueprint, coming to life. Real bricks. Her husband, Sanet, making them himself. Real bricks. She's got most of the metal pieces for the roof kind of tucked away beside. So their old house is there. Here's their new house that's coming up. So their house, coming to life. The blueprint.